In 2011, Madison Scott and her friend Jordy would go on a little trip to Hogsback Lake in British Columbia. This was only a 20-minute drive away from where they lived, so this wasn't going to be a far away trip, and it was just going to be like a weekend getaway. Hogsback Lake is actually quite known to be quite calming and relaxing, and it's very beautiful. I haven't been there, but honestly, British Columbia is just so beautiful, and it looked like the perfect camping spot. While they were on this trip, there was a Facebook post that went around that kind of invited a lot of people. Sometime during this trip, Jordy would end up leaving the campsite with her boyfriend after she got into a fight with some of the people that were at this camping trip. But Madison would stay back. By Sunday morning, Madison's parents became worried since they hadn't heard from their daughter, so they decided to make a little trip to Hogsback Lake to go and check on Madison. Clearly, this was something that worried them because they hadn't heard from her. When they arrived, they found Madison's truck and her tent, but Madison was nowhere to be seen. And actually, Madison hadn't been seen since the night prior. It would take them over 12 years, almost to the exact day, for them to find Madison, but it was too late. Madison's body was found by a farmer who was digging up some soil, and he would find remains of a young girl. She was found 12 miles away, though, from this campsite. And nobody knows how she ended up there, who put her there. Did she go there herself? Did someone take her there? How come no one found her for so many years? It seemed like the more answers they got to these questions, the more questions they had. And today, we're going to be talking about Madison Scott and what we know. Welcome to the Decomposing Flower podcast. I'm your host, Jen. With me is Kira. In this podcast, we talk about all sorts of things that are kind of true crime adjacent. So if you find that kind of interesting, feel free to subscribe or follow us on Spotify or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Today is going to be kind of a little bit of a missing persons case that is technically solved, but her death isn't solved, and there's been a lot of theories of what happened to Madison. There isn't a whole lot of information on this case, so this is probably going to be more of a shorter episode, but if you do have any information that, maybe I leave out and you want to kind of join in the conversation, feel free to, and we would love to hear from you. On April 29th, 1991, in Vanderhoof, British Columbia, Dawn and Eldon Scott would bring into the world Madison. She would go on to go by the name Maddy, and she grew up with two siblings, Ben and Georgia, and their family was very close-knit. They were just a very tight, close family that just kind of lived their life. Maddy was interesting because she wasn't really your stereotypical girly girl, but she also wasn't your stereotypical tomboy. She kind of was a mixture of both. She was kind of like the girl that loved to wear dresses, but she also loved to wear overalls and get kind of into the dirt. She definitely was more of an outdoorsy girl. She loved dirt biking, she loved hockey, horseback riding, sports of all kinds, and also hanging out with her friends. Maddy was described as this fun girl who just loved to make her friends laugh. And she did kind of what a lot of teens did in 2011 and even prior. She made a lot of YouTube videos, which is something that Kira and I used to do. Well, I mean, we still technically do this. Madison was just definitely your fun girl. She just loved making her friends laugh. And she was quite free-spirited, which kind of showed up on her wrist because she actually had a bird tattoo on her wrist. Now, I don't know exactly the meaning behind this tattoo, but it kind of just shows you, like, she just had this free spirit. She was a risk taker, but she also was very responsible. She would make sure her grades were all good, that she did everything she needed, but she also would go and spend time with her friends. So she kind of did her own thing. She kind of had like the perfect mix between going to school and making sure her grades are good, but also having fun with her friends and partying. But she always made sure that her responsibilities were done. After she graduated high school in 2009, she would work as an apprentice heavy-duty mechanic with her father at MBG Logging. So When Madison was 20, on May 27th, 2011, Maddie and her friend Jordy were planning on going on this little camping trip to Hogsback Lake, which was roughly around 23 kilometers away from Vanderhoof. It's only about like a 25 to 30-minute drive. This place, like I said earlier, is just very beautiful. It's just very relaxing. And they were kind of just planning to go there with a few of their friends. So Maddie would drive there in her truck, and once her and Maddie kind of got to the campsite, they were gathering some firewood, but after some time, Maddie realized that she needed a bigger tent and some more poles. So she decided to get back into her truck and go back home. After she returned, it seemed like this was supposed to be just a stereotypical, like, friend thing, but there was a post that went around Facebook kind of being like, hey guys, we're going to be having a party. If you've ever grown up in a smaller town, especially when Facebook was like very bopping, it was so common just for people to be like, hey, we're throwing a party. I know people still kind of do this like on Snapchat or even like Instagram close friends, but on Facebook, like I always remember seeing people being like, we're throwing a party. And of course, this is in British Columbia, so the legal drinking age I think is 19. So obviously, a lot of these kids, they were coming in and they were showing up with alcohol, and it kind of went from it being a couple friends to a lot of people kind of just relaxing and drinking, and it got pretty rowdy. So once Maddie kind of arrived there, it seemed that she might have been tired or whatever, so she ended up retiring back to her tent. I'm not exactly sure if she got there later or if she was just tired or maybe there was just too many people or what, but she ended up going back into her tent. Unfortunately, with more people and more drunk people means you're going to get people that are a little too rowdy. So there was a fight that broke out around midnight, and this fight happened between Jordy, and she ended up hurting her wrist. I'm not exactly sure what the fight was about, but it was enough for Jordy to be like, I'm going to go and leave with my boyfriend. But before she left, she ended up going to where Maddie was and asked if she wanted to go home with her, but Maddie decided to stay back. In the following morning, on Saturday at like 8:30 in the morning, Jordy and her boyfriend would come back to kind of collect some of Jordy's things, like her sleeping bag and her clothes. And when she went into Maddie's tent, Maddie wasn't there. Her clothes and her sleeping bag and her truck and everything was still there. So Maddie was probably just maybe hiking, or maybe she was hanging out with some other people. It is like a nice camping spot where, you can go on these little hikes. And so Jordy just ended up leaving with her boyfriend again, and the last time Maddie was ever seen was that night. So there was actually a second party. Now, I don't know if this party was bigger, if it was more crazy, or what really happened, but this was the last time Maddie was ever seen. By the time Sunday morning rolled around, Maddie's parents realized they hadn't heard from Maddie. She hadn't been texting them, and clearly this must have been enough for them to be really worried. So they ended up getting in their truck and driving down to the campsite around noon. Once they arrived, they found Maddie's tent that had been flattened, like it was getting ready to be packed back up. Her truck was there, but Maddie was nowhere to be seen. Maddie's truck was also locked, meaning she had her keys, but they couldn't find Maddie. After some time of them not being able to get a hold of Maddie, not being able to find her, they would end up calling the RCMP. And once the police arrived, they kind of were interviewing a few people, and they would end up making a missing persons report. The only item of Maddie's that was missing was her iPhone and also her keys. Now, Hogsback Lake is roughly around 128 acres with clear water. And the clear water you can actually see within 10 feet. So they had to look everywhere. These search parties included divers searching the lake. They had people on boats. They even had people search by foot, by quads, horseback, vehicles, helicopters. And they also had canines and cadaver dogs, anything that could kind of help them search for Maddie. They even had friends and family coming in and searching everywhere. They actually were searching well into the night. I believe it was like until like 10 p.m. but they could only search so far because the forest is dense. They actually were all like holding hands as they were walking into the forest because they wanted to make sure they weren't going to get lost. And obviously, with a forest, once it's too dense, you really can't go any further because you're going to end up as a missing person too. So they really weren't able to get any leads on Maddy. Obviously, they were doing interviews on everyone. It seemed like there was nothing that went wrong. It was almost as if Madison just vanished into thin air. Maddy didn't really have any enemies. She didn't have, some crazy ex that was threatening her. There wasn't any leads that kind of would be like, oh, well, maybe she got in a fight with this person. It just didn't make any sense. So, Maddie's friends and family, they would do a lot of events, fundraisers. They also created a website called findmaddy.ca, which is actually still active today. Although the last post was in 2024, this website has a lot of information on Maddy. It has a lot of pictures of her. It also has information if you have to contact them if you know anything. But they had this website. They also created billboards. They used social media. They had a reward for $100,000 if anyone had any information on who did this to her or if they knew what happened. But it seemed like there was nothing. Even 48 hours raised awareness, as well as Crime Stoppers. And obviously, like YouTube and podcasts like this were bringing more awareness, but nothing. Nothing was found until 2023, 12 years later, almost to the exact date. Maddy's remains were found on a rural property around 20 kilometers or 12 miles from Hogsback Lake. So a few sources stated that this farmer was digging up on his land and that's when he found these remains. So she had been buried. Obviously, they were able to identify this as Madison. But this raised a lot more concerns. What happened to Madison? Why was she 20 kilometers away from where she was? Why didn't she take her truck? How was she so close but so far away at the same time? It just didn't make any sense. So I'm kind of going to go over some theories. So, a few theories is foul play, of course. It could have been as simple as Madison got in a fight with somebody and maybe they hurt her, or maybe she was drunk, or did she reject somebody, or it could honestly be anything. It could be as simple as someone got drunk, maybe they did something, they hurt her, and then they panicked and they went and hid her body. Because the thing is, where Maddy was hidden, it wasn't really walking distance. It wouldn't have made any sense for her to be there. It seems more plausible that she either was transported there after she died or she traveled there before her death and then was killed, and then whoever did this maybe potentially buried her. I don't even know how she ended up on this rural property. That's what's so odd. Some people were trying to theorize with her getting drunk. They were saying that it would have made more sense if she ended up in the water, which I agree with. I feel like her getting walking off and getting drunk, I feel like that theory would make more sense if she was found in the lake, but she wasn't. Another major theory is the Highway of Tears, which we actually did discuss this in one of our earlier episodes. I think it was episode 10. So for those of you who don't know what the Highway of Tears is, it's this massive highway that is roughly 700 kilometers or 447 miles across British Columbia. It's on Highway 16, and this location is known to be quite dense with forest, and a lot of girls and women end up missing and they're never found again. Except typically the victims that are usually going missing and being taken on this highway are Indigenous women. And Madison, from what I can tell, is white. And I'm not saying that that couldn't happen, but it wouldn't really make sense for her to be on that highway and for something to happen to her and then for her to be taken to a rural property. Because typically, what people do on that highway is they will rape or they will kill these young girls and then they just hide them in this dense forest because it's too hard to find people in that forest. Also, this highway is massive. So, this definitely could be a theory, but logically, to me, it doesn't really make much sense for her to be found on a rural property, if that makes sense. There were some theories from locals on Reddit, and I mean, take Reddit with a grain of salt, that there were these two shady brothers that killed her, but I couldn't really find any evidence or any sources on this. So I don't really want to blast two random guys because I mean, for all I know, these could just be two people on Reddit that have beef with these guys and it's nothing. And from what we know, everybody that was at the party and at the campsite was cleared. There was no evidence leading to them. And so there really is nothing that is leading anyone to Madison. From what we know now, this case is still ongoing. A few days after Maddy was found, on June 3rd, 2023, a vigil was held at her high school, and it was very beautiful, and it was a way for her family and her friends to at least be able to put her to rest because, of course, for 12 years, they didn't know where she was. They didn't know if she was alive or if she was taken somewhere. It's important that when we remember Maddy, we don't just see her as another missing girl or another statistic, and that we see her as the person she was. She was this fun, creative, outdoorsy girl that made her friends laugh. She had family and friends that loved her. I always hate ending episodes where it's like we don't really have a conclusion, but I just don't want to kind of just turn Madison into another concept, another missing girl that we make an episode on. I just think it's important that we remember that Madison was a real person and her friends and family are still there and they're still trying to find out who did this to her. And I do think it's almost kind of beautiful to know that Madison still impacts a lot of her friends and family to this very day. And I just hope that her family and friends are able to get some kind of closure. And I really hope that they're able to get some information on who killed Madison. As of right now, we have no idea. If anything does come out in the future, we will, of course, leave it in the comments. But that's what we have for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening. Again, we meant no harm to Madison's family or friends, and I hope I explained this with as much empathy and care as I could. And we will see you guys next week.